Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Recently I played through a bunch of PlayStation 2 games with the goal of trying to figure out what my top 10 were. I have a couple honorable mentions that didn't quite fit in the top 10, there's only so many slots, and I want to get into those, but before I get into those, I just want to give a little disclaimer that, this is just my opinion. My opinion isn't going to match the Metacritic scores, so it's not objective at all. That would be kind of boring, honestly. I could do that though. But anyway, these are just my opinions. I've only played probably 100 or so games out of the 4,000 plus library of PlayStation 2 games that exist, so that's going to narrow my perception of it, and also my taste does not fit onto everybody else's, so this is just my opinion, and that's it. I think people understand that though, so it's not a big deal. But we'll get into my honorable mentions, and the first one is going to be the game Draken the Ancient's Gates. Now, Draken the Ancient's Gates is basically a Souls-like before Souls-likes, and that's why I really like it. Reminds me a lot of Souls-like games. It's got exploration, really good combats, dodging, and all that, and then of course all the RPG elements, such as getting new gear, equipping that, leveling up, all that stuff. Also a really good story. So Draken the Ancient's Gates didn't quite make the top 10, but I really like the game, so honorable mention. The other honorable mention I have is going to be kind of two games in one, and that's the Lego Star Wars series, Lego Star Wars 1 and Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy. And these are just probably a little bit of nostalgia, goes into how much I like these games, because I used to play them a lot when I was a kid. It's just kind of the ultimate collectathon. I mean, there's so many different, I forget what they're called. They look like little stop signs, mini something, but you collect them in each level, and then you're trying to get true Jedi in each level, and then you're also trying to use the money that you get, the studs, to buy all the characters and buy all the bonuses and buy all that stuff. So it's really just the ultimate collectathon. Follows the Star Wars story, which is really cool too. Lego Star Wars, another honorable mention. With that out of the way, let's get into the actual top 10. Starting with the number 10 spot, I want to start with a phenomenal game. It's called Summoner. Now, Summoner would probably be like in my number 1 or 2 spot if it weren't for some pretty bad issues with it, and I want to just get those out of the way. That way I can kind of end my little segment on it with a high note. Summoner does have some issues. Those are going to be that it's laggy on the PS2. The PS2 just doesn't seem to be able to run it as well as it can run other games. So there's a bit of lag, a bit of draw distance issues, some stuff like that. There's a lot of loading screens, and the loading screens are not short. It takes a long time to load new areas, and there's a lot of areas that it needs to load. For example, sometimes you'll go into a city and you'll go deep into it, going through 6 different loading screens, going deeper and deeper into the city, and it's like 30 seconds to a minute per loading screen. You get a quest, and then you have to leave the city to do the quest, and it's outside of the city, so then you're going through those 6 loading screens once again. That's really sad. On top of that, there's no auto saves, so you are incentivized to save very frequently, because if you die, you start over at the beginning or your last save. So you're incentivized to save frequently, and then that on top of the loading screens is just kind of a lot of sitting around and waiting. And that was really the main reason why this game wasn't much higher on the list. I had to put it lower just because of that. Beyond those issues, if they would port this to PC, some kind of device that can render it or load it, I should say, faster than a PlayStation 2, then all of those issues would be fixed for the most part. Maybe add autosave just for, nice feature. Get rid of the lag, get rid of the loading screens, have autosave. It would be like, it would be in my top 10 games, I swear. I love this game so much. It's got so much going for it. Hey guys, it's the editor version of myself here. I did actually find out that this game is on PC, and it did fix all the loading issues, so yeah, there you go. The first thing, obviously, is just the lore. This is an RPG, and you can talk to basically every single character in the game, and they will give you a perspective on what's going on around them that is unique to each character, which is really cool. It kind of reminds me of Morrowind, like in that way. There's a lot of other games that do that, but it's just really cool. The game world has really deep lore, and you can learn that lore through all of the NPCs, and you're incentivized to kind of go around and chat with them and figure out what's going on. It's super entertaining in that way. The other thing is the combat. It's kind of turn-based, where you'll go up to the enemy, click the button, your character will start attacking, and it's kind of turn-based in that you'll attack, they'll attack, you'll attack, they'll attack, and it goes like that. But there's this little icon that shows up above your character's head, like right when they do their swing for like a split second. And if you hit one of the D-pad buttons right when that happens and you time it correctly, then you'll start doing a chain attack. What your character does depends on what button on the directional pad you press. So there's a lot of different options for whatever enemy you're fighting. And when you do a chain attack, you'll attack multiple times per turn rather than the enemy attacking in between. Combat's really, really cool. I don't know if there's anything else necessarily like that, and it's got a very deep depth, for lack of a better word, to the combat, and I absolutely love it. It's phenomenal. Exploration and deep lore, it's got a lot of that. There's a huge world to explore. There's a summoning and a party system, so it's not just your character going around that you level up and all that with the RPG system, but you have a whole party, and your character can summon stuff once you get the ability to do so. There's these rings that you're trying to collect, which is part of the main quest, and as you get more of those rings, you'll get more summons, and you can level those summons up and get different versions of them, and that adds to your party. You can also play as any of the characters in the party, and they are all wholly unique, where they all have different armor sets, different weapons, and the directional pad buttons for the combos that do special things are different per character, and there's a ton of customization. It's just phenomenal. Like I said, this game would be way higher if it didn't have that sort of tedium of the loading screens and the lagginess, and just it feels very sluggish to play just because of that. But other than the sluggishness, if that were fixed, I really wish they would port this to PC. You could probably emulate it, maybe. That would probably clear up the lag. You know, maybe that's the way to go. But yeah, Summoner, fantastic game. Absolutely love this. Definitely check it out. It's kind of underrated, kind of a hidden gem of sorts. Check out Summoner if it sounds interesting to you. It's really good. Really, really good. So in the number 9 spot, I have the game Star Wars The Force Unleashed. This is another collectathon, a lot like Lego Star Wars. It's not as good of a collectathon because there's not as many things to collect in that way, but it makes up for it with some other features that I really like. For example, the combat is very good. There's a whole force system, there's a whole combo system where you can unlock new combos, tons of different abilities. There's, different lightsaber tricks, there's jumping attacks, all the combos, and you can also manipulate objects around the environment with the Force and throw them at enemies, and use the Force to make the enemies explode and throw them into the other enemies, and it's just so fun. It's so good. Yeah, the collectible part of it, I really like collecting the lightsabers. You can get different lightsaber colors. That was one of my favorite parts. Different costumes or different clothes for your character to wear. That's always fun to look around for those. They're hidden, so you have to look for them, and that's always fun to replay the levels and try to find the old stuff that you missed. It's always a good time in any collectathon. It's a good story. It takes place in between episode 3 and 4 of the Star Wars movies, just kind of during that transition period between the Republic falling apart and the Galactic Empire rising and the birth of the rebellion and all that. It follows an apprentice of Darth Vader, and you play as him coming of age and becoming sort of a Sith Lord and doing all that. It's a really good story, very interesting for the lore. It kind of sheds light on some areas that might be a bit more hidden in the Star Wars universe, so I always like that. And then the last thing, the boss fights are just phenomenal. You're fighting Jedi or different droids or whatever it might be, and it's always fun. They always have something unique about them that you have to consider to defeat them. The boss fights are really good. I always like games with good boss fights and good combat, so Star Wars The Force Unleashed really hit the nail on the head with that one. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about it. Star Wars The Force Unleashed, a fantastic game if you've never played it. I would highly recommend. And it's also on a lot of other consoles and stuff too. The PlayStation 2 version is a little bit laggy, a little bit low graphic fidelity, things like that. So it is on PC. You can get it on, I think, PlayStation 3 as well, and newer consoles. So maybe that's a better option. But Star Wars The Force Unleashed is a phenomenal game on the PlayStation 2. And yeah, that's all there is to it.
Hit him hard!
And in the number 8 spot, the game we have here is Okami. Now, the first thing anybody thinks when they look at this game is the graphics. You know, that's probably the immediate first thing you'll look at and be like, wow, that's very unique, because they are. It's got a cel-shaded graphics style, and there's other games that do that, like Borderlands, for example, but nothing quite looks like this. It looks like a painting, like a pre-Meiji restoration Japanese painting. It looks phenomenal. It looks really good on the PlayStation 2. And it's not just graphical fidelity. In fact, I don't think the graphical fidelity on this game is necessarily all that good. When I say that, I mean like the lighting and the resolution of the textures and the amount of polygons on each character. That all is pretty average or even substandard in some areas, but that's totally fine, because the way that they do the graphics and the art design on it completely makes up for it. In fact, I would go as far as to say this is probably the best looking game on the PlayStation 2 as a whole. I really can't think of anything else that looks better than this game on the PS2. It's phenomenal. That the graphics are just the first thing you're going to look at. I love that about the game. It was a huge factor for me. I hate to admit it, because I don't like to be a graphics snob like that. I don't really like factoring graphics into my opinions about games that much, but the graphics of this game are just absolutely phenomenal and definitely boosted it for me. The gameplay itself, though, is actually pretty good. It's kind of a story heavy, but also exploration heavy, puzzle solving type of game. And kind of the main gimmick with it is there's this like divine paintbrush. I forget exactly what it's called. I think it's divine paintbrush, something like that. And you use it to, for example, maybe you'll go up to like a lake that's blocking your way, or a river, and you'll use the brush to draw a bridge across the river. Or there'll be like a statue in your way, and you pull out the brush and you cut the statue down, and then you can move past it. You also use this brush to fight enemies. Like when enemies pop up, you take the brush out, do these little slice things through the enemies, and the brush will kill them. So that's kind of how most of the gameplay works. I really like the puzzle solving part of that. The combat's also pretty unique and pretty fun too. But yeah, it's a really fun game, and the lore is really cool too. It follows Japanese myths and stories of you know, the kami, the Shintoist things, and that's always really cool. I really like games that delve into deeper subjects like that, and it's cool to explore the different myths and legends of Japanese culture. Yeah, that's Okami. Fantastic game. I think it's exclusive to the PS2, or it was, and there's an HD version on PC. I just want to give one warning though. The game is a little hand-holdy at the beginning, and it gets a bit tedious at the beginning. If you push past that beginning part, it's very fun, but sometimes it's like, okay, there's a little bit too much text here. But if you can get past that initial little part where it's like, okay, stop, you know, take off the tricycle wheels, please, a little bit. Just get past that, and it is just a phenomenal game. So, yeah, Okami, number 8. And in the number 7 spot, I have the game Katamari Damacy. Katamari Damacy is a very unique game. That's definitely a theme with this list. I understand that. I like games that have kind of unique concepts and are things that you can't see anywhere else. Basically, the whole thing about Katamari Damacy, what its gameplay is you are trying to roll a ball around to pick up items that are small, and then eventually that will make your ball bigger the more items you pick up, and then as the ball gets bigger, you can pick up even bigger items. Kind of the dictionary definition of the snowball effect. You're doing that. You're building the ball with smaller objects so that you can get bigger objects, which then make the ball even bigger, and you're just trying to get the ball as big as possible. And each level, you're trying to hit a certain goal. The levels do get more challenging as you go on. The game has really good graphics. I just want to point that out. They kind of went with the, I think it's cel-shaded. I could be wrong on that, but basically their whole goal was seemingly to just go very simple, and all the objects look very simple, very basic, and I like that. It works really well, especially on PS2. When they do things like that, it just ages better because it looks simple. And whenever you get high fidelity graphic games that are going for realism on older consoles, and then you look at them nowadays, they just look really bad. I always appreciate games like this just because they don't age as poorly. The graphics are pretty good, and then the kind of graphics outside of the levels look really cool. I forget the guy's name, but there's kind of this god that gives you directions and follows you around, and there's always these like little dialogue cutscenes with him, and those look really, really good, especially on a CRT. Love that about it. The concepts of, you know, rolling the ball around is very fun. The gameplay has very good progression to it that just feels really good. When you are able to pick up an item that you just weren't able to pick up a little bit ago, that always feels really good. And then it's like, wow, the ball used to be so much smaller. I couldn't even like get up on top of this ledge, but now that the ball's so big, I can just, you know, roll over it like it's not even an obstacle. And just that feeling of progression just is so good. I love games where you start off small and weak and you just work your way up until you're very powerful and big, and this is like really just the simplest form of that gameplay style, so it scratches a very specific itch for me that I like a lot. Yeah, very good progression, feels very good. And then the levels, since you're trying to hit a higher and higher goal each level, that in and of itself kind of has a good progression to it. But yeah, and the game's funny. The whole concept is funny. The dialogue in between the levels is kind of goofy, and it's got funny sound effects. The whole thing is just a good time. There's not really any complaints about it. It also did come out on PC. You can get it on PC on Steam, and that's also a really good way to play it. But yeah, Katamari Damacy, number 7. Very, very good game. And in the number 6 spot, I have Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex. Now, I had to have a double take on this game just because I knew that I had a lot of nostalgia for it, just because I played it as a kid a lot, and also the reviews online are just not very good. They're somewhere in the 60s. But after playing it again and comparing it to other games in my collection, I've come to the realization that it definitely deserves to be in the top 10, and this is by far one of my favorite games on the PS2. Without going into a whole rant about how much I disagree with the negative reviews, I'll spare you from that, and I'll just get into what I love about this game. The first thing that really sticks out to me is the soundtrack and the audio design. The first thing I think of when I think of this game is the amazing music. There's so many good soundtracks, and they are, if I just got done playing it, you know, for a week or two after, I will have the music stuck in my head pretty regularly. The music is really good, really catchy, really fun, and the sound design is also quite good as well. When, you know, you take damage, when you break crates, when you collect items, when you slide through enemies, when you do attacks, all of it, it sounds very nice. It has a very good audio design to it. The platforming is also very tight. I really like the platforming. It feels very good. You have to be particular about where you land and how you do your jumps, and there's like long jumps and short jumps, and there's body slams and slides, and there's a lot of different types of movement you can do with Crash Bandicoot, and it all feels very good overall. There's also boss fights that are good at the end of each grouping of levels. A main boss you have to fight, they're one of the masks that you have to beat, and they're all unique and they're all very fun. The level design is very good. I've always had fun going through the levels. They're very memorable. They're all very different. They don't ever feel repeated, or you never feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again. I really like that about it. You're always getting something new the next level you go into, and the combat's quite good. There's a lot of different enemy varieties. It feels like every level has its own enemies. I think that's true. I don't know if there's really many duplicates, and all the enemies have different movement and different attack patterns and all that, and you kind of have to figure it out as you go. It never feels repetitive, and yeah, the game is just really good overall. The entire gameplay is really fun, and there's never a dull moment with this one. It's always evolving and changing, and definitely check out Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex. Don't let the mediocre reviews turn you off from this game. It is very good. I absolutely love this game. Number 5, Shadow of the Colossus is a true work of art, and it's one of the first examples I think of when people are talking about if games are pieces of art or if they're just, toys. This is kind of the first example that I think of that makes me lean more towards the art side of things. The game has a deep story with some deep philosophical connotations. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's a very good story. Yeah, I would highly recommend that part of it. The gameplay is also very fun too, though. It's not all just story driven, which if it was, I really wouldn't be as big of a fan of it, but thankfully the gameplay is also phenomenal. There's a gameplay loop that consists of finding the Colossus and then killing the Colossus. Now, the finding part of it is always different per Colossus. Sometimes you'll be going through a big mountainous ravine, sometimes they'll be like hidden in this underground area, sometimes you'll have to parkour to get to them or whatever it may be. It's always different and it never feels repeated. And then once you get to the Colossus, you typically have to climb up the body, and you don't always have to climb the body actually, but you do have to hit its weak points. That's how you kill the Colossus. It always provides a unique fight each time. It's never the same. No Colossus is the same as another. The whole game just never feels like you're doing any repeated stuff. Every new fight and every new section of the game is completely different from the last, and the puzzle solving is just phenomenal. There's a lot of thinking involved in this game. It's not mindless by any stretch of the imagination, and it's a meaningful game with a very fun gameplay loop. And yeah, I love Shadow of the Colossus. The only complaints I have about it is that on the PS2 version of the game, it is a little bit laggy. You are dealing with very massive colossi throughout the game, and it's a very big world, so, I understand why. There is a PlayStation 4 remake of the game, which does get rid of some of that lag, and that might be a slightly better option, but the PS2 version does a phenomenal job regardless, and if you've never played the game, I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. I absolutely love Shadow of the Colossus, and it's just one of those games that you have to play through once. But yeah, Shadow of the Colossus. And now, in a complete 180 from the last game on the list, I have the number 4 spot, which is Burnout Revenge. Now, Burnout Revenge is a fast-paced, hectic racing game in the best way possible. It's basically the whole premise of it is really just to be as chaotic as possible. You're trying to make the other cars crash, slam into walls, and all that. You're racing in the dirtiest way possible. There's also traffic coming at you too that you have to dodge around. You can also crash yourself, which will put you behind, but there is a crash breaker system where if you do crash, you can blow your car up, which will make other cars around you explode, and you get extra points by taking down the other racers that you're racing against. It's so chaotic, it's so hectic, it fits so well in the racing genre. It's kind of like you're battle racing in a certain way. The track design is also very good. The tracks are never boring. There's always jumps and ramps and tight corners, and it never feels like predictable. It's always chaotic. Like that's really what they went for in this game, was maximum chaos. This game is beloved by lots of people, including myself. There's not a whole lot else to say about it. There's a few different game modes that all pretty good. It's one of my favorite racing games of all time. Highly recommend Burnout Revenge. Number 3, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2. You can also include Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance in here, the first one. I just didn't want the list being filled up by multiple games from the same series, taking up slots from other games like that. The number 3 spot really goes to both games. I would give the edge slightly to the sequel, just because there's more characters to choose from, and there's just a bit more to it. It's more complex, and there's more to the story. It's not like other Baldur's Gate games. It is actually an ARPG. It's not really a CRPG. It's closer to Diablo than the mainline Baldur's Gate games. It does feel like Baldur's Gate in a lot of ways. It's kind of like Diablo plus Baldur's Gate on PS2. If you haven't played any of those games, then this might not mean anything to you, what I'm saying right now. It's an RPG, so you've got your leveling up, trying to upgrade your weapons and armor, looking for rare variants of weapons and armor, and just trying to upgrade all that, going and doing quests for people. There's side quests, there's the main quest, lots of different things like that, exploring around the map, trying to find secrets. And the game has very good enemy variety. Every time I play the game, I'm running into new enemies, and it doesn't ever feel like things are repeating themselves, which is always good for me. I always hate when I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over again, so that's always fun. And then the exploration is really fun. It's just a really well done ARPG. I like a good action RPG, and this is really the best you can get on the PS2. It checks all the boxes. It does the action RPG just as good as any other game does. For that, I gotta put it in here. I love the genre, and this game is one of the greats in that genre. So yeah, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1 and 2, really. Number 2, TimeSplitters. If you've looked into the PS2 at all, you probably know about TimeSplitters. TimeSplitters is just an absolutely phenomenal first-person shooter. Definitely the best one on the PS2, and definitely makes it also in my top 5 FPSs of all time. TimeSplitters is just so good. It's got good gunplay, fast-paced. The whole concept of it is very unique. I like the story and the lore. You're basically going through time, trying to find these artifacts throughout time, and there's these time splitters, which are this race of aliens that are trying to stop you from getting all these artifacts, and they're trying to get the artifacts themselves. Whenever you go into a level, you're attacking the inhabitants of the time period that are there. So when you're going through ancient Egypt, you're fighting mummies and stuff, but then you get the artifact, and now the time splitters are showing up through these portals, and you have to extract, get out of there, while all these time splitter aliens are spawning in trying to kill you. And then you'll go into a different time period where you're going to 1980s China, for example, and the same thing happens. You're getting attacked by this Chinese mafia in 80s Hong Kong or whatever it might be, and then once you get your artifact, then all of a sudden all the time splitters are spawning in again. You got to get out, and it's so fun. Each level is a completely new area with new enemies, besides of course the time splitters. Those are a constant, but you can hopefully forgive them for that. And then of course the level design of each level is interesting too. There's always good cover for the enemies and for yourself. There's rooms that will mislead you to, so you're trying to get in and find the artifact, and then you're trying to get out to the extraction zone. Each time you're getting misled and walking into rooms that are dead ends, because the level design is meant to kind of misdirect you a bit, and it's almost like finding your way into the center of a maze and then having to find your way out on each level, and that's always a fun extra layer to the gameplay. And then of course you have your multiplayer part of it too. Load up split screen, fight your friends in split screen, and that's always a super good time as well. Lots of different gun variety, a lot of different types of guns you can use, from rocket launchers to pistols. Very fast-paced game. You can run and gun, or you can take it a bit slower. You are on a timer, kind of, when you're trying to find your way out, so that is kind of forcing you to be fast-paced, and the game can be very hectic. It's just such a good time. Highly recommend TimeSplitters. If you've never played it, especially if you like first-person shooters, you absolutely have to play TimeSplitters. It is so unbelievably good. I love this game. Get an emulator. Even if you don't have a PS2, play TimeSplitters. It is so good. And in the #1 spot, I have Star Wars Battlefront 2. I don't feel like I really need to talk about this game, but I'm going to anyways. I know this game, you know this game, everybody knows this game. It's Star Wars Battlefront 2. If you haven't heard of it, I don't know why you're watching a game on PS2 games to begin with, because if you've played any video games ever, you've probably heard of this game. It is the GOAT. I don't even know where to start with this. Like, I don't even know really what to talk about. I guess my favorite game mode is Galactic Conquest. Of course, you're trying to conquer the galaxy, obviously. It's kind of like this big board game where you can buy different types of troops to use on the battlefield and different bonuses, and you can build ships on the planets that you control, and you're trying to send your ship to go invade the other planets of the other team, or the planets that the other team controls, and try to invade them to take them so that you control them. If you come across their ship in space or above a planet, then you're going to be doing a space battle. I've always wanted some kind of game like it. The only thing that is really anything near it is like Star Wars Rebellion. It's just such a good game mode, and I don't know why they didn't bring it back on the remakes when they announced that EA was going to be doing the remakes of Star Wars Battlefront. That's like the one thing I wanted was Galactic Conquest, and I feel like a lot of other people wanted it too, and they just didn't do it for some reason. There's tons of other game modes. I mean, you've got your, of course, your story mode, which is phenomenal. It takes place in between episode 3 and 4, kind of like Star Wars The Force Unleashed that I was talking about earlier. It's kind of in between there, and it follows the 501st Legion and their transformation from clone troopers to stormtroopers. That's always a very interesting kind of thing to look into, and the story is overall very good. The objectives are good. It follows a very informative, lore-heavy story that I really like. There's also, of course, your instant action where you can just choose what map you want and choose what team you want to play as, and you just can go at it. There's like this conquest game mode that I really like where you're trying to capture command posts throughout the map. That's one of my favorites. Your space battles. You can also, in instant action, you can choose heroes versus villains on Mos Eisley, which is always fun, where the other team is all the hero classes, like your Luke Skywalkers, your Mace Windu's, your Princess Leia's, and no like regular troops like clone troopers or stormtroopers. And then, you're playing as the villains or vice versa. That's always a really good game mode. The music is really good. It uses Star Wars music. You can't go wrong. It's some of the best soundtracks that exist is in Star Wars, so everybody loves that. It's just very addictive. There's so many different game modes, so many different ways to play the game. The gunplay is very fun. It's like Battlefield in that there's a giant battle going on. Either play as like a sniper or a bazooka trooper or a jet trooper or any of these special units. There's just so many different ways to play, so many different game modes. The gunplay is really fun. You can play as any heroes. It marks all the boxes. I honestly can't even think of a single issue with the game, frankly. It's just a phenomenal game. Star Wars Battlefront 2. I don't need to glaze it anymore. It's just such a good game.
I can't believe I'm getting paid for this.
Alright, and with the top 10 concluded, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if there are any PlayStation 2 games that you really like, what games would be in your top 10. I'm always interested to play new PS2 games, or any games for that matter, and discover new things, especially ones that you'd consider underrated or things like that. So yeah, let me know in the comments. I'm really curious. Of course, I want to try out more PS2 games. Let me know what your favorites are. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you don't mind leaving a like or subscribing if you want to see more content like this, just go ahead and do that. Well, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.